They were executed while they slept, 8 members of the same family, across 3 homes, in one coordinated attack. The killers spared 3 children, and that chilling detail was the first clue that this wasn't some random act of violence. What investigators uncovered next exposed a shocking motive, a twisted custody plot, and a family willing to destroy everything to get what they wanted. They were wiped out while they slept. Not 1, not 2, 8 lives. Gone. All from the same family. All executed in cold blood. This wasn't a robbery. It wasn't random. And it sure as hell wasn't just some dispute gone wrong. This was a calculated ambush, carried out in the dead of night across 3 separate homes, all owned by the Roden family. April 22, 2016. Pike County, Ohio. The kind of town where people wave to each other on dirt roads, leave doors unlocked, and keep family close. But on that morning, the peace shattered. Someone, or maybe multiple someones, crept in while the family slept and pulled off what's now considered the worst massacre in Ohio's history. Christopher Roden Sr., the family's patriarch, was shot 9 times, 5 to the face. His cousin Gary, shot through the head at point-blank range. The muzzle left a print on his skull. Chris's son Frankie and his fiancée Hannah, murdered in their bed, their 4-month-old baby lying peacefully between their lifeless bodies. Dana Roden, 5 shots to the head. Chris Jr., only 16, shot twice through the top of his skull while he slept. Hannah Mae, just days after giving birth, gunned down beside her newborn, who was still trying to nurse from her when she was found. And here's the part that doesn't make sense, unless you already know the twisted motive behind it all. 3 children were spared, deliberately, carefully, almost lovingly. One was found lying on the floor, another, in bed next to their murdered parents, a third, still clinging to their mother. It wasn't luck, it wasn't mercy, it was part of the plan. That's what makes this case different. Most killers panic, most leave trails, but not here. No shell casings, no signs of struggle. Not even the family's notoriously aggressive pit bulls made a sound. Whoever did this knew those homes, knew the routines, and knew exactly what they were doing. They didn't just want to kill. They wanted to erase, wipe out every adult who could stand in their way. And they nearly succeeded. But even the most twisted plans have one weak spot. And in this case, that weak spot was the very child they tried to keep. What came next unraveled one of the darkest, most disturbing motives investigators had ever seen. This wasn't just murder. This was execution, surgical, silent, and absolutely heartless. Whoever carried it out didn't just want people dead. They wanted them erased. No warnings, no struggle, no chance to fight back. The Roden family was hunted like prey, each victim shot with horrifying accuracy, as if the killers had practiced for this moment. 5 shots to the head, 3 through the face, some while they were still asleep, others as they reached for their kids. The youngest adult victim had just given birth 4 days earlier. She was trying to nurse her newborn when she was killed. But what chilled investigators more than the bodies was what wasn't there. No shell casings, no cell phones, no sounds. No one in the neighborhood even heard a single gunshot. That's because the killers brought suppressors, homemade, but effective. The kind of stuff you don't just stumble across, unless you've been planning for weeks, maybe months. And then there's the phones. Every single device was gone, not stolen in a panic, taken deliberately, because those phones weren't just communication tools, they were evidence. Evidence that could trace movements, expose messages, or pinpoint suspects. But whoever did this knew that, and they didn't leave a single screen behind. This wasn't some jealous ex. This wasn't a drunk uncle snapping under pressure. This was organized, precise, and deeply personal. From the moment investigators stepped into those crime scenes, they knew something was off. The blood, the bodies, the babies left behind, it didn't add up. Unless the motive wasn't just to kill, but to control. And that control? It centered around one child. And the people desperate enough to kill for her would stop at nothing to make sure they got what they wanted. The bodies weren't even cold before rumors exploded. When authorities found illegal grow ops and whispers of animal fighting on the Roden property, theories spread like wildfire. This wasn't just a family tragedy anymore. It started to look like a professional hit. And people began asking a much darker question. Was the Roden family mixed up with something far more dangerous than anyone realized? One of the first leads investigators chased was a supposed connection to a Mexican cartel. The brutality matched. Close-range headshots, total silence. No one spared, except the kids. It had all the signs of a cartel-style operation. After all, cartels don't just kill, they send messages. But Pike County, Ohio? That's not where these groups usually operate. Still, authorities couldn't ignore it, especially after discovering a marijuana grow site tucked away near Kenneth Roden's barn. quiet, rural, off the grid. The perfect place to grow large amounts of product without getting noticed. Until 8 people ended up dead. Then came another name, the Cornbread Mafia, a lesser-known but equally feared organization born out of Central Appalachia. They weren't flashy, they weren't international, but they were deeply rooted in the local terrain. This crew was known for running pill mills, meth labs, and underground networks across Kentucky and Ohio. Hidden in the hollers, they had been flying under the radar for years. Violent, yes. Capable of this kind of bloodshed? No one wanted to believe it, but they had the reach. And the motive? Now law enforcement was caught in a storm of possibilities. Was this drug-related? A gang war? A silent warning from an underground group? With cockfighting cages found and suspicious activity on the road and land, it wasn't hard for the community or investigators to assume the worst. Maybe the Rodens got involved with the wrong people. Maybe someone got greedy. Or maybe someone inside the family was hiding something darker. But none of those theories explained one critical detail. The children were untouched, protected, spared on purpose. That didn't sound like cartel work. That didn't fit the Cornbread Mafia either. That level of selective targeting? That pointed to something else, something closer to home. And once investigators stopped chasing shadows and started digging into family drama, what they found would make cartel theories look tame by comparison. All roads suddenly led back to one name: Wagner. Not a gang, not outsiders, but a local family with deep ties to the Rodens and even deeper secrets. And at the center of it all was Jake Wagner, the ex-boyfriend of Hannah Roden and father of her daughter, Sophia. From the outside, the Wagners looked like a close-knit, church-going family. But behind closed doors, they were something else entirely: controlling, isolated, and obsessed with keeping Sophia, no matter the cost. Jake and Hannah's relationship wasn't some teenage love story gone wrong. It was toxic from the start. Jake was older, controlling, possessive, and the longer they were together, the worse it got. Hannah confided in friends that she felt trapped, not just by Jake, but by his entire family, who seemed to monitor everything she did. She couldn't breathe without someone watching. When she tried to leave, Jake didn't just get angry. He got calculated. He wanted custody of Sophia, full control. And just like that, the Wagners went from ex-boyfriends to obsessed manipulators willing to do anything to take a child that wasn't theirs to begin with. Even after the murders, they tried to play the role of concerned relatives. Jake went as far as filing for custody of Sophia, as if he hadn't just lost the mother of his child in a brutal ambush. What raised every red flag imaginable was the paperwork, signed by Hannah, supposedly, before her death, giving Jake sole custody if anything happened to her. How convenient. And yet no one dared to say it out loud. Not at first, because the idea that an entire family, parents and sons, would orchestrate a massacre over custody? It sounded insane. Until you looked closer, because suddenly the Wagner family wasn't just looking suspicious, they were vanishing. They packed up, left Ohio behind, and moved to Alaska. Not exactly what innocent people do after a mass killing. And here's the kicker. When they finally came back a year later, they showed up like nothing ever happened. New jobs, smiles, fresh start. But underneath the surface, something was off. The same family that once isolated themselves was now pretending to be model citizens. It was all an act, and soon, it would start to fall apart. Because the truth about Jake, Hannah, and Sophia was far darker than anyone imagined. And the story that was about to unravel would prove the Wagners weren't just involved. They were the masterminds. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about revenge. It was about control. The kind of control that twists love into obsession and obsession into murder. What the Wagner family wanted wasn't complicated. They wanted Sophia, Jake's daughter. But more importantly, they didn't want to share her. Not with Hannah, not with the Rodens, not with anyone. When Hannah made it clear that she wouldn't hand over full custody, something in the Wagner household snapped. They didn't go to court. They didn't negotiate. They met around a table, like a sick family meeting, and made a decision. If they couldn't have Sophia entirely, no one else could live to stop them. And yes, they actually voted on it. They drew up a list. A kill list. Not random, not emotional, strategic. They targeted the people who had a legal or emotional claim to Sophia. One by one. Parents, siblings, even distant cousins. Anyone who could raise a challenge in court or speak out publicly became a target. Jake wasn't just bitter over the breakup. He was boiling with jealousy. Hannah had moved on. She was seeing someone new. She'd just had another child. To Jake, that wasn't heartbreak. That was insult. And for a guy like him, rejection wasn't just painful. It was unacceptable. Angela Wagner, the matriarch, played her part too. She wasn't a bystander. She was forging documents behind the scene, fake custody papers that conveniently named Jake as the sole guardian of Sophia if anything ever happened to Hannah. And guess what? Those documents were ready before the murders. Think about that. The Wagners didn't just want to win custody. They wanted to wipe out the competition. They wanted a clean slate. No battles, no courts, no rodents. Just Sophia and full control. And to make it happen, they were willing to kill not one, not two, but 8 people. The horrifying part? They thought they'd get away with it. They believed that by silencing everyone, no one would ever question the custody transfer. No one would ever look at them sideways. And no one would ever know what really happened that night. But they were wrong. Because the very thing they tried to steal, the child at the center of it all, would eventually become the key to exposing every last one of them. This wasn't spur of the moment. This was planned like a military operation. The Wagners didn't just wake up one day and decide to end a family. They prepared for months. Every move, every detail, every tool. They bought guns, but not just any guns. Ones that were quiet, with low recoil so they could shoot up close without missing. They picked .22 caliber rifles and pistols, the kind that make less noise and are easier to handle in tight spaces. Then came the suppressors, devices built to muffle gunfire. Not professional-grade silencers, but homemade ones. Crude, effective, the kind of thing you build in your garage when you're trying not to wake the neighbors while murdering a family. They didn't stop there. They attached brass catchers to their guns. Little bags that trap used shell casings so nothing gets left behind. No bullets, no evidence, not even a footprint if they could help it, which is exactly why they bought new shoes. But not for style. They picked shoes that didn't fit, bought from Walmart, still in the box. Why? Because if the police found any prints, they wouldn't match the Wagners' real shoe sizes. Every step of the crime was designed to deceive, and it gets worse. They even bought a cell phone jamming device to block all signals in the area the night of the murders. So even if someone managed to wake up and reach for a phone, it wouldn't work. No text, no calls, no help. Angela Wagner, the mother, stayed behind the scenes, writing fake custody documents to make it all look legal. She forged Hannah Roden's signature, claimed Hannah gave Jake full custody of Sophia in case anything happened to her. And those papers? Already drawn up before the Rodens were killed. If that doesn't scream guilty, what does? Meanwhile, Jake and George spent hours practicing in the woods, firing at trees, testing their gear, and getting ready for what they knew was coming. When investigators finally searched the area, they found burned-out suppressors, shell fragments, and evidence of months of planning. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a blueprint, a step-by-step guide to erase a family and walk away clean. But even the best-laid plans have cracks, and the Wagners, as calculated as they were, couldn't hide forever. They didn't blink. They didn't hesitate. They executed an entire family in the dark and disappeared. On the night of April 21st, 2016, while most of Pike County slept, the Wagners got to work. One by one, they moved through the Roden homes like cold, silent predators. No forced entries, no noise, just cold steel, muffled gunshots, and bodies left behind. They knew the layout, they knew the schedules, and they knew who had to go. Christopher Roden Sr. first, the man they saw as the biggest threat to Jake's custody claim. Then Frankie and Hannah Gilley, shot while sleeping in bed with their newborn lying between them. Dana Roden, 5 shots to the head. Her teenage son Chris Jr., executed while asleep. Hannah Roden, just days after giving birth, murdered next to her baby. But every child was spared. That wasn't mercy. That was strategy. The Wagners didn't kill the kids because the kids weren't a threat. They only killed the adults. The ones who could fight back, testify, or stand in court and say, "No, Sophia doesn't belong to you." It was targeted. It was personal. And it was terrifying. Once the killing stopped, the cleanup began. They didn't just toss their weapons in the woods or bury them behind the house. That would be too sloppy. Instead, they placed the murder weapons, guns, silencers, shell casings, into gallon buckets of wet cement, turning them into makeshift boat anchors, and had a relative drop them in a lake. Gone. Out of sight. Out of reach. They even destroyed their clothes and ditched the truck used during the murders. Every item, every trace, erased. And then, they packed their bags and fled. To Alaska. Not a vacation. Not a break. A full-blown escape. A family of 4, now suspected of murdering 8, vanished into the wilderness thousands of miles away. New names, new lives, new jobs, smiling in public, all while hiding one of the most calculated massacres Ohio had ever seen. They thought they'd buried it. They thought they'd start over. But they didn't realize just how much they left behind. And what happened when they came back would expose everything. They thought they got away with it. They came back from Alaska smiling, took new jobs, acted normal. The Wagners blended back into Pike County like they were just another quiet, hard-working family. But something felt off. Too perfect, too rehearsed. And soon, the mask started to slip. It started small, strange comments, awkward behavior. But the real crack showed when two women suddenly fled the Wagner family. One was Jake's new wife. The other? His mother, Angela. Both disappeared without warning. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. And when investigators found out what they told their relatives in private, that's when the tide turned. Behind the scenes, the Wagners weren't a family. They were a cult-like unit, ruled by manipulation, control, and fear. Every decision passed through Billy or Angela. Marriages were monitored, outside friends were discouraged, and when someone tried to break free, they were cut off. So what made these women run? What did they hear? What did they see? And most importantly, what were they afraid might happen next? Investigators knew this was their window, so they made a move. Listening devices were planted, inside work trucks, phones were tapped, and conversations were quietly recorded. It was a bold risk, but it paid off, because the Wagners weren't just hiding bodies. They were hiding truths they couldn't stop talking about, boasting, slipping up, letting just enough detail fall out of their mouths to piece the puzzle together. Suddenly, everything that seemed too clean made sense. The cement-filled buckets, the forged papers, the escape to Alaska. It wasn't random, it was a cover-up. And now, the very people who thought they were the smartest in the room had walked straight into their own trap. But it wasn't just words that brought them down. What investigators uncovered next would blow the case wide open. Jake Wagner cracked. After 2 years behind bars, the silence finally got to him. He wasn't a martyr. He wasn't loyal. He was scared. And when the pressure hit its peak, Jake did what cowards do. He folded. He didn't just confess to one murder. He admitted to 5, pulling the trigger himself. He gave up the plan, the timeline, the weapons, the roles each family member played. No more secrets. No more lies. Just the raw, sick reality of what the Wagners did that night. Jake exposed it all. How they bought the suppressors, forged the custody papers, practiced in the woods, and even used cement-filled buckets to sink the evidence. He named names. His father, his brother, his mother. No one was safe. Angela Wagner, who played the fake peacemaker all along. She was the one who forged the custody documents and helped design the entire plan. George Wagner IV, not just an innocent bystander. According to Jake, he pulled the trigger on 3 of the victims himself. So much for family values. Jake didn't spill out of guilt. He did it for a deal. The death penalty was on the table, not just for him, but for all 4 Wagners. So he cut a deal. Full confession in exchange for life behind bars. No parole for 32 years, and the state would spare his family from the death chamber. Let that sink in. He helped murder 8 people and still bargained for a better outcome. His confession was brutal, cold, detailed. He talked about aiming for heads. He explained how they moved between homes, who shot who, and what they said afterward. It wasn't just a confession, it was a blueprint for evil. And because of Jake's testimony, the entire Wagner family went down. Angela got 30 years. George IV, 8 life sentences, without the chance of parole. And Billy Wagner, the so-called mastermind, still awaited trial. But with Jake's words ringing in every courtroom hallway, his fate was already sealed. But here's the part that'll never sit right. Jake Wagner helped plan and carry out one of the most calculated mass killings in state history, and still lived to talk about it. And for the survivors of the Rodin family, that so-called justice will never be enough. Justice was served, but it didn't feel like justice. For the surviving members of the Rodin family, no sentence could ever undo what was done. 8 lives taken, entire bloodlines wiped out, and all because one family couldn't handle losing control over a child. Jake Wagner got life with the chance of parole in 32 years. Angela, the woman who helped forge the lie that started it all, was sentenced to 30 years. George IV, the one who refused to cooperate, got the harshest punishment, 8 life sentences with no possibility of parole. He chose silence, and the court gave him exactly that in return. But one man still stood trial. George Billy Wagner III, the father, the enforcer, the architect of the plan. His trial became one of the most highly anticipated events in Ohio's recent history. Everyone wanted to see if the man who orchestrated a massacre to gain custody of a toddler would finally face the consequences. And if there was any justice left, he would. But here's the haunting part. while the Wagners will grow old behind bars. Sophia will grow up with a legacy she never asked for. Imagine one day learning that your mother, your uncles, your grandparents, almost everyone who shared your blood, was taken out in a single night. All because your father wanted to keep you so badly. He destroyed everything around you to do it. No child deserves that. And no amount of courtroom speeches or prison time can erase the fact that the Wagners carried out one of the most cold-blooded crimes in modern American history and tried to pretend they were just a normal family the entire time. For the people of Pike County, the scars will never fully heal. But with each conviction, each sentencing, and each crack in the Wagner family's twisted empire, there's one small piece of closure. They thought they'd win custody by killing off the competition. Instead, they destroyed their own lives in the process.